Hello, Zysos here. I am continuing my efficiency look, my deep dive video guide shenanigans I'm often doing. This time I'm decided to go in deep on the first campaign that we have, the Rise of Red Skull campaign. So just before we get started, I figure I should let you know there's going to be some spoilers about most of the decisions that you get to make. So if you haven't played it and want to go in blind, I suggest coming back to this video at some future point rather than right now, because we're going to go in on that. But this will also primarily be from a solo expert perspective, but I'll try and touch on standard and non-solo play as I go. But we'll just get started. As always, we'll start with the assumptions. So I've decided most of these are probably the same that I go through in previous videos. 2 forward, 3 damage, 3 healing, 2 resources, all equivalent. So this is consistent with the findings in the other videos. I know I said in the earlier ones with the damage, I said it might actually be, it was like 1.522, but at this point I'm pretty settled on 1.5, and damage equals healing, so they're the same, and yeah, the fraught being lower. Still happy with fraught being 1-for-1 with resources. Anyway, drawing a card is worth 1.1 resources. This is just rounding up from the value I found in the actual drawing a card one. It keeps the math relatively simple, the significant figures relatively low, because it's only 2 now instead of 4, which means that if the numbers are a little off, you can kind of see it as like a rounding error, but it actually significantly more accurately represents what a drawn card represents, even if it's still not perfect, because it's not taking into account the what did I call it? Acquired value, I think it was the value where the card has outside of it being a resource, outside of the fact that it's a resource. Anyway, and it's not that far off the 1.075 value that you get from just assuming that you're running the 3 double resource cards. It's only a little bit higher than that. So I think it's a pretty good value to use. It could be a little bit higher if you're running, say, Captain Marvel, but it's closer to like 1.2 with Captain Marvel. But this will make the math relatively easy and will be accurate from most characters. Villain activations, I actually don't think this comes up in the campaign. Well, it does come up in the campaign when you're playing it, but not from the decisions. I've decided that I'm just going to start calling them free resources. When I was doing the alter ego, the cost of an alter ego turn, I noticed that all those numbers were sitting around that 3 points. Some of them were like 2.7, some of them were 3.2. The only one that was like 4 was like Risky Business Stage 3 Norman Osborn scheming. That's a very strange scenario. It has some very high numbers relative. So for now, I haven't run the numbers on the Rise of Red Skull scenario to see if it's still consistent, but because it's consistent with everything before Rise of Red Skull, and Rise of Red Skull doesn't feel like these numbers are particularly higher, doesn't feel like we've got villain power creep just yet, I feel like it's safe to say that a villain activation is worth about 3 resources, like a negative 3 resources, right? You're going to spend 3 resources to counteract whatever they've done, which in my head gels with what I would normally think. I would normally think about 4 to 5 damage when I was getting attacked by a villain. It seems relatively accurate. Anyway, assumptions out of the way, let's get right into the main thing. So the first thing we need to consider is what choices do we make in the campaign overall. So the 4 scenarios are the only ones that really have choices. The 5th scenario being Red Skull is just that's where all the choices come together, and you win or you lose at that point. Now, some of these you might say aren't really choices. They're just things that come off from playing the game, but because you can lose and then replay the scenario and still keep your progress, I consider them choices, because what should happen is if you're not doing good enough, you have the option to reset. Basically, let your characters all die, reset, or just give up and shuffle it up. But so we just need to consider what are the actual optimal choices for, like, when should I reset, and maybe you don't even want to deal with that, but it's just something to consider in the long term. So we'll start with the Crossbones scenario. So it gives the experimental weapons and winning feature the tech cards, which we'll go into more in a bit. But the experimental weapons, they aren't actually that scary. They don't have any surge. They go into play. Most of them only take 2 resources to clear, although it's a particular 2 resources, so that can make it more difficult. It has actual resource symbols, but the exosuit has all 3 symbols on it. But honestly, I think they're actually less scary than the some of the encounter cards in the later sets. Like the Red Skull encounter deck can actually be pretty stacked with scary effects. So it might actually be better to just let them into play. I basically with Crossbones, I just finish it whenever I finish it. I don't delay or anything, although I have considered delaying a turn so that he can get an extra experimental weapon out to try and thicken the decks of the later ones. I'm not really certain if that's correct or not, but I feel like they're weaker than the other alternative cards, so it could be the correct call, but I'm not 100% on that. There are some weird things though, like if the Retaliate one hasn't come, not the Retaliate, yeah, actually no, the Retaliate one. If the Retaliate one hasn't come out yet, and you're playing Leadership, you might not want, you don't want to let the Retaliate one come out. That's the one that you actually care about, but it's still random. There's always the chance, if you've only got one that you're not seeing, you're gotta be, if you've only got one you're not seeing, then there's a 75% chance it's already in play anyway, and you might as well get the other one and thin the deck a little bit more. Anyway, tech cards we'll cover later because I think they're actually a more interesting choice, and I want to go into more detail on them. Delay counters from Absorbing Man. They are strictly negative. You never want some more delay counters, but once you get past 8 in Expert, or 8 per player in Standard, which if you're solo is 8, it doesn't matter. Their threat that is placed on the first scheme in the Red Skull scenario, and it has 8 per player. So if you have 8 per player already, it doesn't even matter. Like, you can take your time with that, but the only thing to really note with that is that because you're playing Absorbing Man, you should rush. You should rush, try and beat him as quick as possible. If you can beat him in 4 or 5-ish, anything less than 5 I think is fine. 7 is awkward for like Iron Man, because you don't not necessarily want to flip turn 1 and he's going to scheme on the second scheme. 6 is a little bit better, but that's only because it's Iron Man and stays in Alter Ego. Regardless, once you're over 8, there's no difference between 8 and 100 or more. It's always just going to immediately advance you to the second scheme. Condition cards I'm going to go into more detail on, so they'll be left to a later point. I'll probably just cover the improved versions, but the basic versions are just the improved versions without the the draw effect. Now, this third scenario, Taskmaster, this is where the campaign gets very different from the solo play, because saving these allies in the solo play is just kind of like a nice thing to do, get you some pretty good value in this scenario, but it makes this scenario really easy if you can do it. But saving them in campaign play can make the rest of the campaign insanely easy because they are so very undercosted. Like, there's a reason for it. They're supposed to be high risk reward advantages for playing campaign play. So yeah, and most of the campaign mechanics are actually negative. Like experimental weapons and die counters are negative. Engage with a minion is also negative. So this one, you kind of have a choice, but it's one of those choices where you lose the game if you don't get it. Like even if you're able to win, just so that you can get more of these allies. Risk it until you get all 4. I don't think you necessarily need all 4. That could be a little bit of overkill. But getting these allies is strictly positive. So like stalling out the game and just not attacking the villain so that you can stall for longer and longer, just so that you can get more of these allies, is actually a really good play for the campaign overall. It's not super exciting, but if you can, I don't see a lot of reason not to. And if you can get all 4, it's very good. 3 is all 4 is amazing. 3 is very good. 2 is alright. 1 is kind of okay. Like you're not gonna be that far behind. In 0, I feel like you haven't got enough from the Taskmaster scenario for that, and like this is supposed to be like a PowerPoint for you. So, but it's not unwinnable. I've done it, so it's definitely not unwinnable. But it feels a lot nicer to have even just one of these allies saved. For Zola, there are 2 mechanics you need to deal with. There's the Hydra Prison and the engaged with a minion thing. So it's another one of these. The engaged with a minion is another one of these stalling ones. You want to stall out the game till you have no minions, so that when you kill Zola, just so that you don't get an extra encounter card. This one I feel is not the end of the world. If everything else is going your way, like you're already like a decent hit points on expert because your HPs stays consistent between game to game. Or going to talk about more about that in a sec. But and you've cleared or not cleared the Hydra Prison based on whatever your preference is in this case. Then it might be worth just doing it, just because Zola can be a difficult scenario and you might not be able to get even to that point again. But if you can just like stall a turn, there's no downside to stalling a turn. If you're still able to win next turn, but you can not have a minion in front of you, I don't see a reason not to do that. Obviously, if you're swarmed with minions and you know you've got no way of dealing with them, just finish the game. Go to the next one. It's one encounter card. It's probably not gonna break you. The Hydra Prison is normally a positive because it lets you retain your signature ally and makes the condition upgrade better, but it's not strictly positive because some people's signature allies are awful. Like, a good example of this, let's say you're playing Iron Man and you took the recovery upgrade. Let's say you're playing solo Iron Man, you took the recovery upgrade. You're not really planning on recovering all that often. You just wanted it to get your HP a little bit higher when you start the game. And maybe facilitate a turn 1 flip more often. And War Machine is an awful ally. The the signature version. I actually think the basic one's pretty good. But yeah, War Machine is just an awful ally in your signature set. It might actually be better for you to leave him in the prison. There's not many where I would say that is the correct call. It's actually probably only War Machine. Shuri is pretty good. Agent Carter's amazing. Hellcat is She-Hulk's entire fort. Options. Black Cat's amazing. Yeah, the only other case I can think of is 2-player with when the character exists as the signature ally of each other. So at the moment that would be Spider-Woman and Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel can't play the Spider-Woman card, Spider-Woman can't play the Captain Marvel card, but then you both need to be having a condition you don't want upgraded. But if that is the case, then sure, it lets you thin your deck, or not thin your deck, it lets you put in another card to replace it. And another card's probably better than a card that is only a wild icon. But those are the only currently those are the only situations I can think of where you would want to let your signature ally be taken from your deck, and you are losing the improved condition, so it's a call that you need to make, but I think you'll often just take the improved condition in your signature ally back. Anyway, I said I would come back to the tech and condition cards, so that's what we're doing now. These are probably the most interesting decisions that you'll have in the campaign. There's 4 of each, so playing 4-player, all 4 will be taken, so that becomes a decision of who's taking it rather than what you're taking. But let's just get straight into them. So the first one you get is the tech cards. These are 1-use cards that just give a huge boost for that 1 use. They sit in play from setup until they're used. They are very good targets for what is it? That card that deletes an upgrade or support. Caught Off Guard. That's it. They're very good targets to lose to Caught Off Guard because they just go back into your deck and they get set up in the next scenario anyway, and you often want to keep them for Red Skull because they are 1 use per campaign. The fact that as part of a cost, you have to cross them out from the campaign log. You can't use them twice. It's not even like a it's not even like you get to use it for that scenario. The second time it comes through your deck, you still don't get to use it. So anyway, we have Adrenal Stims. Adrenal Stims. Yeah, Adrenal Stims. This one's actually fairly hero dependent. It's 3.3 resources of healing, so 5 healing, and a hero ready. Because Tactical Scanner is 5 cards, which is 5.5 resources of card draw, according to the 1.1 card draw to resource ratio, you need to get about 2.2 value from your hero ready. That means that you probably need 3 thwarts, or 4 attack, or 4 recover, or defense can't really be used with this one because it's a hero action. So you're always gaining another stat rather than defense because you were always going to ready before you had a chance to defend anyway. I guess there's the exception of if you're defending when they're attacking you off turn due to toe or something. It's a very particular case though. You'll generally speaking be using one of your other stats. So yeah, in order to be better than the Tactical Scanner, you really need the 4 attack, 3 thwarts, or 4 recover. And I feel like it's not hard to get one of those. So it's always fairly easy to push the adrenal stims beyond the tactical scanner in forms of just pure power, which means that I think it's actually a pretty good option to take just in general. That said, I don't think it's as good as the next one. Emergency teleport searches your deck and discard pile for an ally, so you just go find whatever ally you want, you put it into play, and then you give it a stuff tab. So put into play is not played, so you don't get that, but you do get enters play effects. So that means you don't get, I think most of the played effects we currently have said play from hand. So you can't do like Spider Girls, Stun and Confuse, or Spider-Man allies, destroy a side scheme. But most allies are generally better than their like a lot of allies can still trigger even with this, and most allies are generally better than their sorry, I'm trying to think for a sec. Most allies are generally better than their cost already, and you can already get to costs of like 5 with things like Nick Fury. Heimdall's a 6 cost, effectively. And that is a lot. It's a lot of resources, and then they're already returning better than that. So you get things like Nick Fury's probably not the best target for this, but like he draws 3 cards, gets 2 fraught, and does a blocks an attack. Like that's 3 resources of 2 resources of frauding, 3 resources of blocking an attack, and 3 cards, which is 3.3 resources. We're already up to 6.3, and that's a basic option. Like aspects, signature hero, signature cards. There's all these options that are potentially very strong. Signature allies is a particularly good one. There are some really good signature allies out there. And just grabbing one of them turn 1 against Red Skull for no cost can be pretty insane. The laser cannon's next. It does 3.3 resources of damage to the villain and each enemy engaged with you. That means you want to get at least 2 things. You want to get full value from at least 2 things. It's only minions engaged with you. It's not choose a player. So it's better in solo where you, or on an aggression player that can use get over here to drag things over to them. It is particularly good in solo for one use, and that is to deal with the Sleeper, which is a minion mini-boss thing that turns up in the Red Skull thing that has guard, 5 HP per player, retaliate 1, and toughness. And the main thing here is that you knock off the toughness and then you shoot them with the laser cannon, and it hits both Red Skull and them, meaning you're getting a minimum of 6.6 resources of damage, and that's assuming you've got no other minions engaged with you, and it just clears that minion without having to find an answer to it, and it's a difficult minion to answer, and you only have to take the 1 retaliate then because of the attack to remove the tough, and that's assuming you attacked to remove the tough and didn't ping it with some damage you've got somewhere else. I think it's very good in solo play. In fact, despite the fact the emergency teleport is just potentially just really, really high value, I actually think the laser cannon is probably the better option in a lot of solo decks. In fact, if you can look at your deck and say I can't easily beat something with 5 HP quickly, which I think most non-aggression decks are probably going to have difficulty with it. I suppose Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel's probably a case where they can just deal with it with no problems. Maybe She-Hulk. Black Panther can deal with it pretty easily. Anyway, there are a few characters that can deal with it easily, but if you're not one of those characters, just laser cannon. It'll solve your problems. And as mentioned before, the tactical scanner is 5.5 resources of card draw. It can be a little bit higher if you're running like Captain Marvel or Hulk, because they have more resources in their deck, and in characters where you would consider like a strength in numbers style deck, this actually becomes better as well, where you like thin the deck down and make it super high value, make it full of just like super high value cards like Wakanda Forever. This could be higher than just the straight resource value of it, but it's probably the baseline. I would say it's the baseline for all of these. The emergency teleport can get really out of hand based off what allies you run. The laser cannon get really out of hand based on how out of hand the game has gotten. But the tactical scanner, it's always reliably going to get you that 5.5 card draw, 5.5 resources of card draw, and that pretty much goes over everything here. But the important thing I would say is that you want to keep these to Red Skull. In Expert, it's the only scenario you can fail. In Standard, you can't fail any scenario, but the Red Skull ones were all the negatives that you've been where the negatives you accumulated for the other games trigger, so it makes sense to push some more of the positives as well, if you can. So that's these are all one use, so that is it for them. I'm going to quickly talk on the condition cards. Each one of these upgrades they upgrade one stat, they have an amount of plus HP, and they have a trigger that draws a card. The trigger that draws a card is not on the basic version, which you get after Absorbing Man, but the improved version, which is the improved version you get after Zola, which means you have to remove the Hydra Prison in order to get it. But so you have your signature ally back. So if you choose not to save your signature ally, you lose the improved the card draw option. Anyway, so these are only used against Red Skull. The improved versions are only used against Red Skull. The other versions are used in 3 scenarios, which means because of the way the HP works, because in Expert what happens is you set your HP down to what it was previously, up to a maximum of your max hit points, and then these come into play and give you the HP according to a dev ruling. So because they were going in 3 scenarios, that means effectively you get twice the plus HP amount as resources worth of healing. Yeah, I know it's a little weird, but it's because it's applying it 3 times. So like you apply 1 HP 3 times, you've got 3 HP, which is about 2 resources of healing. So the attack upgrade gets about 2 resources of healing because it has a plus 1 HP, and it scales linearly with the other ones as well. So anyway, that means that the attack upgrade with its plus 1 HP actually gets the least amount of healing. It's only getting 2 resources of healing. Okay, that's pretty bad. So next thing, you would think that the plus 1 attack that it's giving must be really good then, but it's not. Attack leads to damage, and damage is a lower value than fraught, and the fraught one has 2 HP on it. Okay, so there's got to be an upside on this, right? So it's got to be the response, which the response in this case is that when you defeat a minion, it's a hero response too, just to make it even more restrictive. When you defeat a minion, you draw a card. The problem with this is that there's basically no minions in Red Skull. It's normally a very quick game because he's got a fairly low HP number, and he really overwhelms you with side schemes if you wait too long. And besides the sleeper, there's just not a lot of minions in there. There's no minions in the side scheme deck. There's only a couple in his actual deck itself, so it all just comes from the side schemes you choose. Not side schemes, modular sets you choose. And even then, sometimes you get weird situations, like if you put Legions of Hydra in there, one of those minions is often immune to damage because it's really hard to clear Legions of Hydra in Red Skull. I just don't think it's often. I just don't think it's very available. I don't think there's often a minion for you to defeat. It's obviously solo. Solo, it's even less often, and as you get more players, because you go through more of the deck, you probably find more minions, which means that you'll be more actively able to trigger the draw. But like, it's the Thwart upgrade is so much better. Like, yeah, it's Thwart instead of attack, and Thwart is a higher value stat. It's 2 HP, so it's double the amount of healing you're going to get. You're getting 4 resources of healing instead of 2. And it triggers on a side scheme defeat, and there's a new side scheme every turn because of Red Skull. So you're probably hoping to defeat at least a side scheme a turn in just in general for Red Skull. In solo, it's probably easier because they come out most of the time with about 3 threat on them. But that's still about what you're going to be working on. And it's a response, not a hero response. So once you defeat a side scheme, you're always going to get that. Yeah, I don't know why the attack upgrade also happens to have the lowest amount of plus HP. It seems to have the worst trigger, one of the worst stats. I think Recover is a little bit less useful than attack. But I don't understand why it's the lowest HP and the worst condition. The defense upgrade, however, makes a bit more sense. The plus 3 HP means that you're getting 6 across the scenarios, 6 resources of HP healing. And the condition of defending, like, it's not even like unflappable where you have to not take damage, it's just defending, is pretty much always available. If you're in hero form, you're getting attacked. That gives you a chance to defend. Now, we know that you don't always want to take that chance to defend. Most characters don't, but on the characters that do, it's a very big deal. Particularly if you're playing an unflappable deck, you can get a really strong draw engine just off defending every turn. And that all adds up. And defense is roughly equivalent to attack in like the value of the stat itself. A little bit lower because it's pushing. It's like avoiding a lose condition rather than pushing a win condition. But it's still it's a reasonable stat. It's just not as good as Thwart, but it also has more plus HP on it. So I think that balances out quite well here, as opposed to attack being seemingly never available. The attack having a trigger that's never available and lower plus HP. The the attack upgrade really boggles my mind. I don't understand why its numbers are like that. I think the fort upgrade should probably have the +1 HP. And I think that would balance them out pretty well. Anyway, last one is the recovery upgrade. The recovery upgrade is really good because it heals you for 4 every at the start of each mission, so you're getting like 8 resources just off that. It's got a recovers worth, like every time you use a recover, it's worth, you know, the one recover will be worth about 0.6, similar to attack and defense. But it's obviously harder to use that because you have to go into alter ego. So it's normally available because you can always flip to alter ego, but you don't always want to flip to alter ego. So, and you get some weird timings with when you draw the card, like you flip to alter ego, you can't flip back to hero, you draw a card, it's got hero action on it, you can't do anything with it, that type of thing. But it's still pretty good, and like generally speaking, I feel like if you're dipping into recover, it's not uncommon to want to recover on both sides of the turn, and that'll get you 2 draw. And like it just increases your max HP. Like it's the most max HP increase out of all of these. I think it's a good one. I think if you don't know which one of these you want to take, this is probably the one to take. It's also very good on She-Hulk, just because the plus HP means that you can be on a lower HP and still be gamma slamming for 15. With this and just endurance, you can gamma slam from 15 at 7 HP. Like that's almost full HP for some characters, and then you would yeah, so you can gamma slam from 15 at 7, which is pretty high. And then if that kills Solar or Taskmaster, you then start the next scenario on 11, which is a pretty reasonable HP, all because you just have this recovery upgrade. And then obviously you can recover for 6 turn 1 and go up to like 17 if you really wanted, but it really depends on what you're doing. But anyway, that's the last of the decisions. So I hope this has been helpful for you, and thanks for watching. But yeah, that was a breakdown of how the what the decisions are like and how their numbers match up with other cards. So hopefully that's helpful. If you have any questions, just leave a comment below. That'd be appreciated. I'll try to get back to you, and I believe that's it. I shall see you next time.